Imagine for a moment that the most terrifying place you could ever wander is not a darkened forest or an abandoned ruin, but a landscape far closer, far more intimate. It is a realm where no light can fully penetrate, where whispers echo without source, and where the ground beneath your feet shifts with every step. This is the terrain of your own mind, a vast, uncharted expanse that holds both your greatest dreams and your deepest dread. Welcome to a journey not of physical horror, but of psychological shadows, where the quiet corners of thought can chill the soul more than any monster ever could. Let us step softly into this unseen world, where fear is not screamed but felt, not seen but sensed, as we explore the subtle, creeping unease that dwells within us all. What is it about the mind that makes it such a fertile ground for terror? Is it the way it can conjure threats from nothingness, painting vivid nightmares on the canvas of a quiet night? Or perhaps it is the way it knows us too well, holding a mirror to our vulnerabilities, whispering truths we dare not face. Think of a moment when a fleeting thought caught you off guard. A doubt, a memory, a fear that seemed to come from nowhere yet lingered like a shadow. In that instant, did you feel the vastness of your inner world? How it stretches beyond your control? A labyrinth with no clear exit? The mind is not just a sanctuary. It is also a cage, a place where the walls are built not of stone, but of memory, imagination, and unspoken dread. Consider the ancient storytellers who spoke of demons not as creatures of claw and fang, but as voices in the head, tempters and tormentors born from within. Long before we understood the brain's intricate dance of neurons and chemicals, humanity sensed that the greatest battles were fought not on fields of war, but in the silent theaters of thought. The Greeks spoke of the Furies, avenging spirits who haunted the guilty with relentless visions of their sins. Were these merely myths, or were they early glimpses into the mind's capacity to punish itself, to weave horrors from the threads of conscience? Even now, in our age of science, we cannot fully map the territories of the psyche. We name its disorders, chart its patterns, but the deeper we look, the more mysteries unfold, an endless horizon of questions that both fascinate and unsettle. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever felt a shiver of unease, not from something outside you, but from a thought that crept unbidden into your awareness? Perhaps it was a fear of failure, a memory of loss, or simply the strange, fleeting sense that you are not as whole as you seem. That shiver is the first step into the mind's shadows, a reminder that within each of us lies a gallery of dread, a collection of fears, both named and nameless, waiting to be stirred. What makes this inner world so terrifying is its intimacy. It knows you better than anyone ever could. It holds every secret you've buried, every doubt you've silenced, and it can resurrect them in an instant, painting your reality with shades of unease. This is not a journey of blood or screams, but of whispers and echoes, of the quiet horrors that live in the spaces between thoughts. It is a descent into the unseen, where the mind reveals itself, not as a friend, but as a stranger, a keeper of secrets you may not wish to know. As we wander deeper into this psychological landscape, we will uncover the many faces of dread, from the faintest flicker of uncertainty to the profound abyss of existential fear. Each step will ask you to look within, to confront not monsters of flesh, but the specters of thought that shape who you are. So let us walk together, slowly, into this quiet darkness, where the true horror is not what lurks outside, but what has always been inside, waiting for its moment to be seen. Imagine a quiet evening, the kind where the world seems to hush itself, leaving you alone with your thoughts. The day has passed, the tasks are done, and yet, as you sit in the stillness, a subtle whisper emerges from the edges of your mind. It's not loud, not demanding, but it's there, a faint murmur of doubt, questioning the choices you made, the words you spoke, the paths you chose. This is where we begin, in the soft, unsettling cradle of uncertainty, where even the smallest seed of self-doubt can take root and grow into something far more disquieting. Picture a person, let's call them Alara, sitting at a worn wooden desk in a dimly lit room. The glow of a single lamp casts long shadows across the walls, and the air feels heavy with the weight of unspoken thoughts. Alara has always been confident, or at least they thought they were. But tonight, something feels different. As they replay the events of the day, a conversation with a colleague, a decision made in haste, a quiet voice creeps in. "Did you say the right thing?" it asks. "What if they misunderstood you? What if you've made a mistake you can't undo?" At first, it's just a passing thought, easily brushed aside. But the whisper lingers, circling back with a persistence that feels almost alive, as if it's testing the cracks in Alara's resolve. This is the first level of dread, the whisper of doubt. It's not the terror of a looming threat or the panic of a visible danger. No, this is far more insidious. A subtle erosion of trust in oneself. It begins with the mundane, the everyday choices we make without a second thought, until that second thought arrives, uninvited. Why do we doubt ourselves in these quiet moments? Is it a protective instinct, a reminder to tread carefully in a world full of unknowns? Or is it something deeper, a reflection of our inherent fragility, a crack in the foundation of who we think we are? Take a moment to reflect on this. When was the last time a whisper of doubt crept into your mind? And how did it feel to hear it? Consider how Alara's evening unfolds. They try to shake off the unease, turning to a book, a distraction. But the words blur on the page, and that whisper grows just a fraction louder. What if you're not as capable as you think? It suggests. What if everyone else sees something in you that you can't? The room feels smaller now, the shadows deeper, as if the doubt itself is casting a presence over the space. Alara laughs, a nervous sound, trying to dismiss it as nonsense. But doubt doesn't need permission to stay. It settles in, planting tiny seeds that sprout in the fertile ground of silence. What begins as a question about a single moment spirals into something broader, something that tugs at the edges of identity itself. Are we truly sure of who we are, or is that certainty just a fragile illusion waiting to be shattered by the smallest crack? Let's wander deeper into this thought. Doubt, at its core, is a universal thread woven into the fabric of being human. It's as old as consciousness itself, a companion to every great thinker, every artist, every soul who dared to dream. Think of the ancient philosophers like Socrates, who built entire schools of thought on the premise that true wisdom begins with admitting what we do not know. Even in their certainty, there was doubt, a quiet, persistent shadow that fueled inquiry. But what happens when that shadow grows too large, when it no longer serves as a guide, but as a saboteur? For Alara, it's not just about questioning a decision. It's about questioning the very self that made it. And in that questioning, there's a flicker of something unsettling, a realization that the mind can turn against itself with the softest of whispers. Now, imagine the weight of this doubt as it lingers through the night. Alara lies in bed, staring at the ceiling, the whisper still echoing in the quiet. It's no longer just about today's choices. It's about tomorrow's and the day after that. What if every step forward is a misstep? What if every word spoken is the wrong one? The once comforting darkness of the room feels heavier, as if it's absorbing the uncertainty, amplifying it. This is the subtle horror of doubt. Not a scream, not a jolt, but a slow, creeping unease that disrupts the calm of everyday life. It reminds us that the mind is not always a sanctuary. Sometimes it's a labyrinth, and the first wrong turn begins with a single quiet thought. Take a moment to sit with this. Let the stillness around you deepen and ask yourself, what whispers have you heard in your own mind, and how have they shaped the way you see yourself? Doubt may be the faintest flicker of dread, but it's also the spark that can ignite something far greater, something that waits patiently in the shadows of our thoughts. For now, let's linger here, in this fragile space where certainty frays at the edges and the mind begins to wonder what lies beyond the whisper. Imagine standing before a mirror in the quiet of a dimly lit room, the world outside hushed as if holding its breath. You've seen your reflection 1,000 times, every morning, every fleeting glance. But tonight, something is different. The face staring back at you carries a strangeness, a subtle wrongness that you can't quite name. The eyes seem to linger a fraction too long. The curve of the mouth feels unfamiliar, as though it belongs to someone else. A shiver crawls up your spine as you wonder, is this truly me? Or have I become a stranger to myself? This is not the horror of blood or shadow, not the dread of a lurking predator, or a sudden scream in the night. This is something quieter, yet infinitely more unsettling, a fracture in the very foundation of who you are. Identity, that invisible thread that ties together every memory, every thought, every fleeting emotion, is something we take for granted. We trust that when we look into the mirror, we will see ourselves whole and unchanged. But what happens when that trust falters? What happens when the reflection becomes a question rather than an answer? Consider a woman named Clara, who once found comfort in the routine of her mornings. Each day, she would stand before her bathroom mirror, brushing her hair, tracing the familiar lines of her face as she prepared to meet the world. But one evening, after a long and weary day, she caught her reflection and froze. The face was hers. Logically, she knew it was, but it felt distant, as though she were looking at a photograph of someone she once knew. The more she stared, the more alien it became. Were those her eyes, or did they carry a weight she didn't recognize? Was that her smile, or a mask she had forgotten she was wearing? Night after night, the unease grew, until the mirror became not a tool of recognition, but a portal to doubt. Clara began to avoid it, covering it with a cloth, yet the feeling lingered. Who was she, if even her own reflection could betray her? This quiet terror, this sense of disconnection from the self, is a profound kind of dread. It whispers to us of impermanence, of the fragility of the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Philosophers have long grappled with the nature of identity. John Locke spoke of it as a continuity of consciousness, a thread of memory that binds us to our past. But what if that thread frays? What if the person you were yesterday feels like a stranger today? Are you still you, or have you become something, someone else entirely? The mirror, in its cold honesty, forces us to confront these questions. It strips away the illusions we cling to, leaving us bare before the possibility that we are not as solid, not as certain as we believe. Think of identity as a house, one you've built over a lifetime. Each brick is a memory, each window a belief, each door a choice. You walk through its halls with confidence, knowing every creak of the floorboards, every shadow on the walls. But imagine returning one day to find the layout has changed. Rooms are missing, staircases lead to nowhere, and the air hums with a presence you can't explain. This is the horror of the mirror's stranger, not a violent intrusion, but a quiet shift, a realization that the home of yourself is no longer yours. And once you've seen it, once you've felt that alienation, can you ever truly return to the way things were? Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever caught your reflection at an odd angle in a fleeting moment and felt a flicker of unease? Perhaps it was just a trick of the light, a passing shadow, but for that brief second, did you question whether you truly knew the person looking back at you? Sit with that feeling, let it linger. It is not a fear of the external, but of the internal, an unraveling of the certainty we hold so dear. History, too, is filled with echoes of this dread. Ancient myths speak of doppelgangers and mirrored spirits, of reflections that steal souls or foretell doom. In some cultures, mirrors were covered during times of mourning, not out of superstition, but from a deeper, unspoken fear that to see oneself in grief might be to lose oneself entirely. Even today, we speak of losing ourselves in moments of crisis or change, as though the self is a thing that can slip through our fingers like sand. Science offers explanations: dissociation, depersonalization, the brain's strange dance with stress or trauma. But no explanation can fully erase the visceral unease of looking into your own eyes and feeling nothing, or worse, feeling something foreign. And so, we stand before the mirror, caught between recognition and estrangement. It is a quiet battle, fought not with fists or words, but with questions that have no easy answers. Who are we beneath the surface of flesh and bone? Are we the sum of our memories? Or are those memories themselves a kind of illusion? A story we've crafted to anchor us in a chaotic world. The mirror does not lie, but it does not comfort either. It simply reflects, leaving us to wrestle with the possibility that the stranger we see is not a distortion, but a truth we've yet to face. As the night deepens and the world grows still, consider this final thought. Perhaps the true horror is not in losing oneself, but in realizing that the self was never as fixed as we imagined. Perhaps we are all strangers, in some small way, waiting to meet ourselves for the first time. Let that thought drift with you, like a whisper in the dark, as you ponder the face that greets you each day. Is it yours, or is it something more? Imagine for a moment that you're entirely alone, standing in the stillness of an empty room. The air is heavy, the silence almost tangible, and yet a strange sensation creeps over you, a prickling at the back of your neck, a whisper of unease that you can't quite place. You turn, expecting to see someone, something, but there's nothing there, just the shadows, just the quiet. And still, the feeling persists, as if an unseen pair of eyes lingers just beyond the edge of your vision, watching, waiting. This is the quiet terror of the unseen watcher, a fear that doesn't need a face or form to haunt us, a dread woven deep into the fabric of our being. This kind of fear, subtle yet pervasive, isn't born from the obvious or the grotesque. It doesn't require a lurking monster or a sudden scream in the night. Instead, it emerges from something far more primal, something etched into our very instincts. Long ago, when our ancestors roamed vast, untamed landscapes, survival depended on sensing danger before it revealed itself. A rustle in the grass, a shadow that didn't quite belong. Our minds learned to conjure threats from the smallest hints, to imagine predators in the absence of proof. That ancient wiring remains within us even now, in the safety of our modern lives. It's why, in the quiet of a familiar space, we can still feel the weight of an invisible gaze, as though something or someone hovers just out of reach. Consider the way this fear plays tricks on us. You're walking home late at night, the streetlights casting long, wavering shadows across the pavement. Every step echoes in the stillness, and though you know there's no one behind you, your pace quickens. You glance over your shoulder, half expecting to catch a glimpse of movement, a figure slipping into the darkness. But there's nothing, just the wind, just your imagination. Or is it? The mind becomes a double-edged sword in these moments, both protector and tormentor, warning us of dangers that may not exist while simultaneously crafting them into being. It's a paradox, isn't it? The very mechanism that once kept us alive now turns against us, filling empty spaces with phantoms of our own making. This unseen watcher isn't always tied to a physical space, though. Sometimes, it's a feeling that follows us into the most intimate corners of our lives. Picture yourself sitting alone, lost in thought, when suddenly you're struck by the sensation that you're not truly alone, that something is observing the quiet workings of your mind. It's as if your own consciousness has split, one part of you watching the other, scrutinizing every thought, every fleeting emotion. Is this merely a quirk of self-awareness? Or does it point to something deeper, something more unsettling? Could it be that we are never truly alone, even within ourselves, that some part of us, some hidden, unknowable fragment, always watches, always judges. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever felt that creeping sense of being observed, even when logic tells you there's no one there? What is it about solitude that can so easily twist into unease, as if the absence of others invites something else to take their place? Let's linger on this thought, on the way our minds can transform the ordinary into the ominous. The unseen watcher doesn't need to manifest as a figure or a voice. Its power lies in its ambiguity, in the way it hovers at the edge of perception. It's the shadow you can't quite catch, the presence you can't quite name. And perhaps that's what makes it so enduring, so haunting. We fear not just what we see, but what we cannot see, what we can only feel. This is a fear as old as humanity itself, a reminder that our minds are both our sanctuary and our labyrinth, a place where unseen forces can linger, watching, waiting, forever, just out of sight. As we sit with this thought, let the weight of it settle over you like a quiet fog. There's no need to chase the shadow or name the presence. Sometimes, the greatest fears are those we cannot confront, those that exist only in the spaces between what is and what might be. And in that space, in that delicate, trembling uncertainty, we find a kind of truth, a recognition of how vast and unknowable our own minds can be, how they can harbor watchers we may never truly see. Imagine, for a moment, a fleeting image in your mind, a scene so vivid, so tangible, that it feels like a memory. You can almost smell the air, hear the faint rustle of leaves, or see the shadow of a figure just out of frame. Yet, as you reach for it, trying to place it in the timeline of your life, it slips away. You're left with a gnawing unease, a question that lingers like a cold breath on the back of your neck. Did this happen, or is it a phantom conjured by your own mind? Welcome to a quiet, unsettling corner of psychological dread, where the past becomes a labyrinth, and the memories we trust turn into specters of doubt. Consider the story of someone, let's call her Clara, who wakes one morning with a fragment of a dream still clinging to her thoughts. It's a simple image, a narrow cobblestone street, draped in fog, with the distant sound of footsteps echoing against the walls. She can feel the dampness of the air, the weight of an unseen gaze pressing against her. But as she sips her coffee, staring out the window at a world far removed from that foggy alley, a strange certainty grips her. This isn't just a dream. She's been there, hasn't she? The details blur at the edges, refusing to solidify, yet the emotion it stirs is sharp, a mix of nostalgia and dread, as if something vital was lost in that place. Clara spends the day combing through her past, flipping through old photographs, revisiting childhood stories, searching for a tether to this memory. But there's nothing. No cobblestone street, no fog, no footsteps. And yet the feeling persists, growing heavier, whispering that she's forgotten something important, something she wasn't meant to forget. What is it about these half-formed memories that unsettles us so deeply? Is it the fear that our minds are not the faithful archivists we believe them to be, but rather storytellers, weaving tales from fragments of truth and fiction? We build our sense of self on the foundation of what we remember, our triumphs, our pains, the moments that shape us. But what happens when that foundation cracks, when a memory emerges that doesn't fit, that feels real, yet impossible? It's as if a stranger has slipped into the house of your mind, rearranging the furniture while you slept, leaving you to question whether you ever truly knew the layout at all. Perhaps the horror lies not in the memory itself, but in the doubt it sows. Doubt about who you are, about what you've lived, about whether the past you cling to is even yours. Think of the human mind as an ancient library, its shelves lined with countless volumes of experience, some meticulously catalogued, others left in disarray. Most of the time, we wander these halls confidently, pulling down a book here or there to revisit a chapter of our lives. But sometimes, we stumble upon a tome that shouldn't be there, a story written in a hand we don't recognize, in a language we can't quite decipher. We turn the pages, desperate to understand, only to find that the words shift and change beneath our gaze. Was this book always here? Did we write it in a forgotten moment of madness? Or did some unseen force slip it onto the shelf? Clara, in her search for the cobblestone street, is pacing the aisles of this library, haunted by a volume she cannot place, a story that feels both intimate and alien. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever felt the weight of a memory that doesn't belong? Perhaps a fleeting image of a place you've never been, or a conversation you're certain you've had, though no one else recalls it. Sit with that feeling for a second, the quiet unease, the subtle shiver of doubt. What does it reveal about the nature of your mind? Are you the sole author of your past, or is there a ghostwriter at work, crafting narratives you'll never fully grasp? Let's linger on Clara's story a little longer. As days turn to weeks, the memory of the foggy street doesn't fade. Instead, it grows sharper in certain ways, more insistent. She begins to notice small details she hadn't before. The texture of the cobblestones, uneven and slick with moisture, the faint scent of rain-soaked earth. But with each new fragment, the dread deepens. What if this isn't a memory of something that happened, but a warning of something yet to come? Or worse, what if it's a glimpse of a life that isn't hers at all? A borrowed piece of someone else's past, somehow woven into the fabric of her own mind. She starts to avoid mirrors, half afraid she'll see a stranger's eyes staring back. Someone who walked that street, someone who knows the truth she cannot face. The memory becomes a splinter, embedded too deep to remove, a constant reminder that her mind might not be her ally, but a keeper of secrets she'll never unlock. This is the subtle terror of the forgotten memory, a horror not of blood or violence, but of uncertainty, of losing trust in the one thing we rely on to anchor us, our own recollection. It forces us to ask profound, unsettling questions. How much of what we remember is real, and how much is a construct, a story we tell ourselves to make sense of the chaos of existence? If the past is a tapestry, what happens when threads begin to unravel, revealing gaps we cannot fill? Perhaps the true dread lies in the realization that memory is not a vault, but a mirror, one that can distort, deceive, and reflect not just who we were, but who we fear we might become. As we sit with Clara in her quiet torment, let the weight of this idea settle over you like a mist. The mind, for all its brilliance, is a realm of shadows, where even the most familiar paths can lead to places unknown. What forgotten fragments linger in the corners of your own consciousness, waiting to be unearthed? And when they surface, will you embrace them as truth, or shudder at the possibility that they reveal a stranger within? Take a moment to reflect on this. Let the question drift through you unanswered, as we rest in the quiet unease of a memory that refuses to be placed. Imagine for a moment that you're caught in a song you cannot stop hearing, a melody that plays over and over in the quiet chambers of your mind, refusing to let go. It's not a pleasant tune, but one laced with unease, a rhythm that drags you back to the same haunting note no matter how desperately you try to move on. This is the essence of being trapped in an endless loop, a mental prison where thoughts circle like vultures, relentless and inescapable. Let us step into this shadowed corner of the psyche, where the horror lies not in what lurks outside, but in the repetition that binds us from within. Picture a man named Elias, an ordinary soul living an unremarkable life, until one day, a single thought takes root. It begins innocently enough, a fleeting worry about a decision he made, a minor choice that spiraled into a question. Did I do the right thing? At first, it's a whisper, easily dismissed as he goes about his day, pouring coffee, walking through the grey streets, nodding to familiar faces. But that whisper doesn't fade. It grows, repeating itself with a quiet insistence, looping back each time he tries to push it away. Did I do the right thing? Did I do the right thing? The words become a drumbeat, a pulse that syncs with his every step, his every breath, until they are no longer just a question, but a cage. Elias tries to escape. He fills his hours with noise, conversations, music, the hum of a television left on in an empty room. But the loop is clever. It weaves itself into the silence between words, the pauses between songs. It waits for him in the stillness of night, when the world is asleep and there's nothing to distract from the relentless cycle. Did I do the right thing? He begins to replay the moment of his decision in excruciating detail. The tone of his voice, the flicker of doubt in another's eyes, the way the air felt heavy with consequence. Each replay is identical, yet somehow sharper, cutting deeper into his mind, as if searching for a flaw he missed before. But there is no answer, no resolution. Only the loop, turning over and over like a broken record, its needle stuck in the same worn groove. What is it about repetition that unnerves us so? Perhaps it's the way it strips away our sense of progress, our belief that time moves forward, that we evolve with each passing moment. To be caught in a loop is to be frozen, suspended in a single fragment of thought while the world marches on without you. It's a quiet kind of horror, one that doesn't scream or startle, but slowly erodes the boundaries of self. Elias feels this erosion. Days blur into weeks, and he can no longer remember a time when his mind was free. The loop becomes his reality, a labyrinth with no exit, where every turn leads back to the same suffocating question. Consider for a moment the nature of the mind itself, how it is both creator and captor. We often think of thoughts as fleeting, as wisps that come and go with the wind. But what happens when a thought refuses to leave? What happens when it claims dominion, turning the vast landscape of consciousness into a narrow circular path? There's a strange intimacy to this imprisonment, for it is not an external force that holds us, but our own inner voice. Elias doesn't fear a monster or a shadow in the dark. He fears the echo of his own uncertainty, amplified until it drowns out all else. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever felt a thought cling to you, refusing to let go, playing itself again and again until it becomes a weight you cannot shed? This endless loop, this mental repetition, reveals a deeper truth about the human condition. We crave control, the ability to steer our minds toward peace or purpose, yet how fragile that control is, how easily it slips through our fingers when a single idea takes hold. For Elias, the loop is not just a thought, it's a mirror, reflecting his inability to move beyond his own doubts. It whispers to him of his flaws, of every moment he's questioned himself, and with each repetition, it carves those flaws deeper into his being. The horror lies not in the content of the thought, but in its persistence, in the way it transforms the mind into a prison, with walls built of memory and fear. And so, Elias walks on, his steps slower now, his eyes distant. The world around him hums with life. Birds call, cars pass, voices rise and fall in the distance, but he hears only the loop, that unrelenting refrain. Did I do the right thing? He wonders if he'll ever break free, if there's a way to silence the echo that haunts him. But perhaps the true terror is not in being trapped, but in the realization that the loop was always there, waiting beneath the surface, ready to ensnare him the moment his guard was down. Perhaps we all carry such loops within us, dormant until the right trigger sets them spinning, binding us to a cycle we cannot escape. Let this linger with you for a moment. The idea that the mind, in all its complexity, can become its own tormentor, crafting chains from the very thoughts meant to guide us. What loops do you carry, hidden in the quiet corners of your consciousness? What questions or regrets play on repeat when the world grows still? There is no need to answer now. Simply let the thought drift, like a melody you cannot quite place, as we sit with the weight of repetition and the subtle, unshakable dread it brings. Imagine for a moment a face you've seen 1,000 times, your own, or perhaps that of someone you've known for years. It's a face of warmth, of familiarity, etched with the subtle lines of laughter or the quiet weight of shared history. But now picture this. Behind that face, a storm rages unseen, a tempest of doubt and dread so fierce it threatens to tear the very fabric of who they are. Yet when they turn to you, all you see is a smile, a perfect polished mask that betrays nothing of the chaos within. How much of what we perceive in others is real, and how much is merely a carefully crafted illusion? This is the silent horror of the mask of normalcy, a fear not of external monsters or looming threats, but of the hidden turmoil we all might carry, concealed beneath a veneer of calm. Picture a man named Elias walking through the bustling streets of a city at dusk. To everyone around him, he is the picture of composure, a tailored suit, a measured stride, a polite nod to a passing colleague. But inside, his heart races with a dread he cannot name. Each step feels like a performance, each smile a lie. He wonders if anyone can see through the facade, if anyone senses the weight pressing down on his chest, the whispers of failure and fear that echo in his mind like a relentless tide. Yet he keeps walking, keeps smiling, because to let the mask slip would be to unravel entirely. Think about the countless interactions you've had, the faces you've passed in a day. How many of those smiles were genuine, and how many were shields guarding against a vulnerability too raw to expose? There's a quiet terror in this thought, isn't there? The idea that we might never truly know the person standing before us, that their laughter might be a distraction from a silent scream. And perhaps even more unsettling is the question of our own masks. What do we hide beneath the surface of our daily routines, beneath the words we choose and the expressions we wear? Are we too performers in a play no one else can see? Take a moment to reflect on this. Consider a time when you've smiled through a storm, when you've buried your true feelings beneath a layer of normalcy. What compelled you to do so? Was it fear of judgment, or a deeper fear of facing your own unrest? Elias, our imagined stranger, sits now at a dimly lit cafe, stirring his coffee with a trembling hand. To the waiter, to the couple at the next table, he is just another man, lost in thought, but inside, he wrestles with a darkness he cannot escape. A sense that he is not enough, that every achievement is a fluke, that every connection is fragile and fleeting. He wonders if others feel this way, if behind every pair of steady eyes lies a similar abyss. Yet he says nothing. He sips his coffee, offers a faint smile to the waiter, and continues the act. The mask remains, not because he wants it to, but because he fears what lies beneath might be too much for the world to bear, or for himself to face. This is the subtle dread of normalcy, a horror woven into the fabric of human interaction. It's not the fear of a sudden shock or a visible threat, but the creeping realization that we are all, to some degree, strangers to one another, and perhaps even to ourselves. What if the face we show the world is not a reflection of who we are, but a barrier to keep the truth at bay? What if the chaos within is the truest part of us, and the mask is merely a lie we've grown too comfortable to shed? Let this thought linger as you drift deeper into contemplation. Imagine Elias walking home under the weight of a starless sky, his mask still firmly in place, yet cracking at the edges with every step. Imagine the countless others like him, passing through their days, their inner worlds hidden behind a fragile shell of normalcy. And ask yourself, in a world of masks, how do we ever truly connect? How do we find the courage to let the facade fall, to reveal the raw, unpolished truth of who we are? Or is the mask itself a necessary shield, a quiet act of survival in a world that demands perfection? Take a moment to reflect on this. Let the weight of these questions settle over you like a gentle fog, inviting not answers, but a deeper awareness of the unseen struggles we all might carry. For in this silent performance of normalcy, there lies a profound and haunting truth. We are all, in some way, both actor and audience, forever caught between the face we show and the one we hide. Imagine for a moment a voice inside you that knows every hidden corner of your soul, every secret you've tucked away in the shadows of memory. This voice, so intimately yours, begins to whisper things you've fought to forget, words that sting with a precision only your own mind could wield. It is not an enemy from the outside, not a stranger's malice, but a betrayal from within, a silent treachery that cuts deeper than any blade. What happens when the one place you thought was safe, your own thoughts, turns against you? Picture a quiet evening, the kind where the world seems to hush itself, and you're alone with the hum of your own mind. At first, it's a comfort, this solitude, a space to unravel the day's weight. But then, a thought creeps in, unbidden, like a guest who refuses to leave. It's a memory, perhaps, of a moment you'd rather bury, a choice you regret, a word you wish you could unsay. You try to push it away, to drown it in distraction, but your mind, that relentless keeper of truths, holds it up like a mirror. It whispers, "Remember this, you cannot escape who you are." And in that whisper, there's a coldness, a calculated cruelty, as if your psyche delights in exposing your vulnerabilities, peeling back the layers you've so carefully constructed to protect yourself. This is not the horror of a sudden shock or a looming threat in the dark. No, this is subtler, more insidious, a slow erosion of trust in the one constant you've always had, yourself. Consider how deeply personal this betrayal feels. An external foe can be fought, reasoned with, or fled from. But where do you run when the adversary is the very fabric of your being? Your mind knows every weakness, every fear, every fragile thread that holds you together. It knows exactly where to press, where to linger, turning a fleeting doubt into a relentless echo that reverberates through your quiet moments. It's as if a part of you has turned traitor, siding not with your peace, but with your pain. Think of the ancient myths, where gods and mortals alike were tormented not by external monsters, but by their own inner voices. In those stories, the greatest battles were fought within, against guilt, shame, or forbidden desires that the mind refused to silence. Even in our modern age, stripped of myth, we carry this same struggle. We've built lives of logic and control. Yet beneath the surface, our thoughts can still ambush us, dragging up the past or inventing fears with a clarity that feels almost malevolent. Why does the mind do this? Is it punishing us for our flaws, or merely reflecting the truths we refuse to face? Perhaps it is neither. Perhaps it is simply the nature of consciousness to probe, to question, to unearth, even when the cost is our own serenity. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever felt your own thoughts turn against you, whispering doubts or memories you'd rather leave buried? Notice how, in those moments, the silence around you seems to grow heavier, as if the world itself is complicit in this quiet betrayal. There's a strange intimacy in this horror, isn't there? It's a reminder that no one knows us as deeply as we know ourselves, and no one can wound us quite so precisely. This silent treachery is a paradox, a dance between protector and saboteur. The mind, after all, is also our sanctuary, the place where we dream, create, and find meaning. Yet it holds this dual power, capable of crafting both solace and suffering with equal ease. It's as if we are tenants in a house we can never fully trust, unsure whether the walls will shelter us or collapse inward without warning. And so, we learn to live with this unease, to navigate the shifting terrain of our own consciousness, always aware that beneath the calm, a whisper waits, a whisper that knows us too well. How do we make peace with a mind that can betray us so silently, so intimately? Or is peace, in the end, just another illusion we cling to, hoping to outrun? The truths our thoughts will inevitably unveil. Imagine for a moment that you are standing on the edge of a vast, silent lake. The water is so still it mirrors the sky above, a perfect reflection of an endless grey. But as you gaze into it, you notice something unsettling. Your own image begins to blur, to waver, as if it's being erased by an unseen hand. Slowly, the face staring back at you fades until there is nothing left but the empty expanse of water. What happens when the very essence of who you are starts to dissolve, slipping through your fingers like mist? What remains when the self you've always known begins to vanish into an uncharted void? This is the quiet terror of losing oneself, a fear so subtle, yet so profound, that it creeps into the marrow of your being without a sound. It's not the horror of a sudden loss, nor the sharp sting of external danger. No, this is a slow unraveling, a gradual fading, where you wake one morning and feel just a little less there. Perhaps it begins with a fleeting thought, a question that lingers too long in the quiet hours. Who am I truly, beneath the roles I play, beneath the memories I cling to? And what if, one day, there is no answer to that question? What if the core of you, the anchor that holds your identity in place, simply slips away? Consider a woman named Clara, whose story whispers of this very dread. She lived a life of routine, of certainty, her days woven together by the familiar threads of work, family, and the small joys of ordinary moments. But one autumn evening, as the light faded and the world grew still, she sat by her window and felt something shift within her. It was as if a piece of her had quietly stepped out of the room, leaving behind a hollow space she couldn't name. She looked at her hands, traced the lines on her palms, and wondered if they were still hers. She spoke her name aloud, but the sound felt foreign, as if it belonged to someone else. Day by day, this sensation grew, an unmooring, a drifting, until she began to fear that she was becoming a ghost in her own life, a shadow without substance. What is it about this fading that unnerves us so deeply? Is it the loss of control, the realization that we might not be as solid, as permanent as we believe? Or is it the existential weight of confronting a void where the self once stood? A void that asks, with a voice as cold as winter air, whether we were ever truly whole to begin with. Throughout history, thinkers and poets have grappled with this terror of dissolution. In ancient Buddhist teachings, the concept of anatta, or non-self, suggests that the idea of a fixed identity is an illusion, a construct we build to shield ourselves from the impermanence of all things. But to embrace this notion is one thing. To feel it, to live it as Clara did, is another. When the boundaries of who you are begin to blur, when you can no longer grasp the edges of your own being, the mind recoils, searching desperately for something to hold on to. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever felt, even for a fleeting second, a flicker of disconnection from yourself? Perhaps in a quiet hour, or in the aftermath of great change, when the person you thought you were seemed just out of reach. What did that emptiness feel like? Did it whisper of freedom, or did it carry the weight of dread? Let us wander deeper into this enigma. Imagine that the self is like a tapestry, woven from the threads of memory, desire, and belief. Each thread is a story you tell yourself. I am this. I have done that. I dream of this. But what happens when those threads begin to fray? When the pattern you've spent a lifetime crafting no longer holds? For Clara, each day became a quiet battle to remember who she had been, to piece together the fragments of a self that seemed to slip further away with every breath. She would sit with old photographs, tracing the outlines of her younger face, hoping to summon back the woman who smiled so confidently from the frame. But the more she searched, the more she felt like a stranger to her own past, as if her life belonged to someone she no longer knew. This vanishing is not merely a personal terror, it echoes a universal fear, one that philosophers like Sartre and Heidegger have pondered in their explorations of existence. Sartre spoke of the nausea of freedom, the dizzying realization that we are condemned to define ourselves in a world devoid of inherent meaning. But what if even that act of definition becomes impossible? What if the canvas of your being is wiped clean, leaving nothing to paint upon? Heidegger, in his musings on being and nothingness, suggested that to confront the void is to confront the fundamental question of why there is something rather than nothing. Yet, for someone like Clara, the question is more immediate, more piercing. Why am I becoming nothing? Why do I feel myself fading into a silence that no one else can hear? As we linger in this thought, consider the quiet horror of not just losing oneself, but of no one else noticing. Clara's friends still called her by name, her family still saw the woman they loved, but inside, she felt like a hollow shell, a vessel emptied of its essence. Is this the ultimate solitude? To vanish within yourself while the world moves on, unaware of the abyss that has opened beneath your feet? Or is there, perhaps, a strange peace in this dissolution, a letting go of the burden of being someone at all? Take a moment to reflect on this. Imagine standing before that still grey lake once more, watching as your reflection fades entirely. What would you feel in that moment of vanishing? Fear, perhaps, or a curious calm, as if the weight of selfhood were finally lifting? Let that thought linger, like a ripple spreading across the water, carrying you into the quiet unknown. Imagine a moment where your hand moves without your consent, reaching for something you swore you'd never touch. A fleeting urge, sharp and unbidden, courses through you, and for a split second, you are not yourself. Or perhaps you are someone else entirely. What if the choices you believe to be yours are nothing more than strings pulled by an unseen hand, buried deep within the recesses of your mind? Let us step into this shadowed corner of the psyche, where the boundary between free will and compulsion blurs, and we are left to wonder if we are truly the architects of our actions, or merely puppets dancing to the whims of impulse. Picture a man named Elias, ordinary in every way, walking home under the dim glow of streetlights. His life is a quiet rhythm of routine: work, home, sleep, repeat. But tonight, as he passes a narrow alley, a strange pull tugs at his core. His feet slow, almost against his will, and his gaze fixes on a rusted knife lying in the gutter, half hidden by shadows. He has no need for it, no reason to linger. Yet, his hand trembles as it reaches down, fingers curling around the cold metal. His mind screams to stop, to turn away, but the impulse is a current too strong to resist. In that moment, Elias is a stranger to himself, a vessel for a desire that feels alien, yet disturbingly familiar. What force drives this? Is it a buried part of him, long suppressed, now clawing its way to the surface? Or is it something deeper, something primal, that lives in us all, waiting for the right moment to seize control? Consider the nature of impulse, that sudden, inexplicable urge that can steer us into actions we later regret, or worse, actions we cannot explain. It's as though a shadow self resides within, a silent passenger who occasionally grips the wheel without warning. Philosophers have long wrestled with this duality, this tension between choice and compulsion. Are we truly free if our desires can betray us in an instant? If a single thought can override years of careful restraint? Think of the myths of old, where gods or demons would possess mortals, bending their will to dark purposes. Perhaps those tales were not mere fantasy, but metaphors for this very struggle, the terror of losing dominion over one's own soul. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever felt that pull, that whisper urging you towards something you know you should resist? Where does it come from? And why does it feel so much like a part of you? Elias stands frozen in the alley, the knife heavy in his hand, his breath shallow. He does not want this, does not understand why he picked it up, yet the impulse hums beneath, his skin like a low, persistent drumbeat. He imagines dropping it, walking away, but the thought feels hollow, as if his body has already decided to disobey. Is this madness, he wonders, or is this the raw, unfiltered truth of who he is? Perhaps we are all layered beings, Our polished exteriors hiding a wilder, untamed core that waits for moments of weakness to emerge. Scientists might point to the brain's ancient wiring, the instincts that once kept us alive in a harsher world. Fight, flee, take what you can. But even if this is biology, does it absolve us? Does it comfort us to know that our darkest urges might be coded into our very essence? Let us linger on this uncertainty, this quiet dread that perhaps we are not as sovereign as we believe. What if every decision, every act of so-called will, is merely the surface ripple of a deeper current we cannot see or control? Imagine yourself as Elias now, standing in that shadowed alley, feeling the weight of something foreign yet intimate guiding your hand. What would you do if you realized that the line between you and the impulse was not a wall, but a thread, thin and fraying with every passing second? The horror lies not in the act itself, but in the question it raises. Are we the masters of our story, or are we merely characters scripted by forces we cannot name? As the night deepens around Elias, the knife glints faintly in his grip, a silent witness to his inner war. He does not know what comes next, whether he will surrender to this urge or wrest back control. But in this moment, he feels the weight of a truth most of us dare not face, that the self is not a fortress, but a fragile assembly of desires, fears, and instincts, each vying for dominance. And perhaps the greatest terror is not in losing that battle, but in realizing we may never have been in command at all. Take a moment to reflect on this. When have you felt that pull, that quiet rebellion of your own mind? And in that moment, did you wonder who or what was truly in control? Imagine for a moment that the world you've always known begins to unravel at the edges, as if reality itself were a worn tapestry, fraying under an unseen hand. You walk down a familiar street, but the buildings lean at impossible angles, their shadows stretching too long across the pavement. A voice calls your name, faint and distorted, yet there is no one there to speak it. The air grows heavy, pressing against your skin, and you realize with a quiet, creeping dread that the rules you've trusted, up and down, here and there, cause and effect, no longer hold. What happens when the foundation of what you perceive begins to crack and the world becomes a stranger to your senses? This is not the horror of a sudden shock or a visible threat. It is something far subtler, far more insidious, a fracture in the very fabric of reality as you know it. Picture yourself in a room you've sat in 1,000 times, a place of comfort and routine. But tonight, the walls seem to pulse, just slightly, as if breathing. The clock on the mantel ticks, but the seconds stretch unnaturally, each one lingering like a held breath. You blink, and for a split second, the room is not your own. Furniture shifts into shapes that defy geometry, and the light casts shadows that move against its source. Then, just as quickly it's gone, and everything appears normal again. Or does it? A seed of doubt takes root. Was it a trick of the mind, a fleeting illusion, or did you glimpse something true, something hidden beneath the surface of what we call real? This is the terror of a fractured reality, where the boundaries of logic and perception begin to blur. It's not just the distortion of the external world that unsettles. It's the realization that your own mind might be complicit in the unraveling. What if your senses, the very tools you rely on to navigate existence, are no longer trustworthy? What if the world you see is merely a fragile construct, a thin veneer over a chaos you cannot comprehend? Throughout history, humanity has grappled with this fear in whispers and stories. Tales of dreamlike realms where the laws of nature bend, of madmen who saw truths the rest of us could not bear to face. Think of the ancient Greeks who spoke of the underworld as a place where reality twisted into nightmare, or the surreal visions of artists like Salvador Dali, whose melting clocks seem to mock the certainty of time itself. These are not mere fantasies. They are echoes of a primal unease, a suspicion that what we perceive is but a shadow of a deeper, stranger truth. Consider the fragility of your own grasp on what is real. How often have you questioned a memory, unsure if it was a dream or a moment lived? How often have you felt the ground shift beneath your feet, not in a physical sense, but in the quiet certainty of your understanding? There is a story told in hushed tones of a man who woke one morning to find his world askew. The sky was not blue, but a deep, unnatural violet. The voices of his loved ones carried an echo, as if spoken through water. He tried to speak of it, to seek reassurance, but their faces grew blank, as if they could not hear his words. Days passed, or perhaps only hours. He could no longer tell, and the distortions grew. Streets looped back on themselves, leading him to places he could not remember ever seeing. Eventually, he stopped trying to make sense of it, surrendering to the notion that reality itself had turned its back on him. Was he descending into madness, or had he stumbled upon a truth the rest of us are too afraid to see? Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever felt the world slip, even for an instant, into something unfamiliar? A moment where the ordinary became alien, where the rules you thought unbreakable seemed to waver. What would you do if that moment stretched into eternity, if the fracture widened until there was no returning to the reality you once knew? This is the quiet horror of a mind caught in a distorted world, where the terror lies not in what is seen, but in the growing suspicion that seeing itself is a lie. It's a fear that gnaws at the edges of thought, whispering that perhaps we are not the architects of our perceptions, but merely visitors in a realm we can never truly understand. And as the walls of that room continue to breathe, as the shadows continue to writhe, one question lingers like a cold breath against the nape of your neck. If reality can fracture so easily, what lies beyond the cracks? Imagine, for a moment, a shadow that follows you not across the ground, but within the recesses of your own mind. It is not a shape cast by light, but a weight born of memory. A weight that grows heavier with each passing day, refusing to be shaken, no matter how far you run. This is the echo of guilt, a force so intimate and unrelenting that it can transform the quietest corners of life into a battlefield of remorse. Let us step into this shadowed realm together, where the past becomes a living thing, a whisper that will not fade, and explore the silent torment that festers when the mind turns its gaze inward. There was once a man named Elias, whose life seemed unremarkable to those who passed him on the street. He carried a gentle smile, spoke in measured tones, and moved through his days with the steadiness of a river carving its path. But beneath this calm exterior, a storm raged, a storm that had begun with a single moment, a choice made in haste, years ago. It was a small transgression, or so he told himself at first. A word spoken too sharply, a promise broken, a door left ajar when it should have been sealed tight. The details mattered little now. What haunted Elias was not the act itself, but the endless ripple it created in his soul. Each night, as he lay in the stillness of his room, the memory returned, not as a fleeting thought, but as a presence. It sat at the edge of his bed, heavy and unyielding, murmuring accusations in a voice that sounded too much like his own. Why does guilt wield such power over us? Why does it linger when other emotions, joy, anger, even grief, can soften with time? Perhaps it is because guilt is not merely a feeling, but a mirror. It forces us to confront not just what we have done, but who we are in the aftermath. For Elias, every attempt to bury the memory only deepened its roots. He tried to drown it in distraction, filling his days with noise and movement, but the echo found him in the pauses, in the quiet moments between tasks. He sought forgiveness, whispering apologies to the empty air, but the words felt hollow, as if the one he needed to absolve him was not another, but himself. And yet, how does one forgive a wound that refuses to heal? A scar that the mind carves anew each day? Consider the nature of this torment. Guilt is not a loud terror. It does not scream or strike. It is a slow erosion, a tide that wears away at the cliffs of our peace until we are left standing on a crumbling edge. It weaponizes our own thoughts, turning memory into a blade that cuts deeper with each recollection. For Elias, the past became a labyrinth with no exit. He would relive the moment of his mistake, dissecting every word, every gesture, searching for a way he might have chosen differently. But the more he searched, the more he found only judgment, his own judgment, sharper than any other. And in this, we see the true horror of guilt. It is not just the fear of consequence, but the fear that we are unworthy of redemption, that some part of us will always carry the stain of what we've done, whether real or imagined. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever felt the weight of a past decision pressing down on you, long after the world has moved on? Can you recall a moment when your own mind became your accuser, refusing to grant you peace? Guilt does not discriminate. It can sprout from the smallest seed. A harsh word, a missed chance, a fleeting thought we wish we could take back. And yet, its growth is boundless, casting a shadow over even the brightest days. What is it about the human psyche that allows guilt to thrive in this way? Perhaps it is tied to our deep yearning for meaning, for a sense of rightness in a world that often feels chaotic. When we stray from our own moral compass, even slightly, the dissonance can be unbearable. We are creatures of narrative, weaving stories of who we are, and when an act disrupts that story, when it paints us as someone we do not wish to be, the mind recoils. For Elias, the echo of his guilt became a kind of companion, a dark reflection that walked beside him. It whispered of his failure, but also of his humanity, for to feel such remorse is to acknowledge the capacity for care, for connection, for the desire to do better. And yet, this acknowledgement offered no solace. It only deepened the ache, as if the very act of caring made the wound more real. Let us linger here, in this shadowed space, and ponder the paradox at the heart of guilt. It is both a burden and a teacher, a tormentor and a reminder of our longing to be whole. But what happens when the lesson cannot be learned, when the debt cannot be paid? For some, like Elias, the echo never fades. It becomes a part of the mind's architecture, a room that cannot be locked away. And in this, we find a quiet horror, not of monsters or mayhem, but of the endless suffering we inflict upon ourselves, armed with nothing more than memory and the unrelenting desire to be better than we were. As we sit with this thought, let the weight of it settle over you like a soft, heavy fog. There is no need to rush away from it, no need to seek an answer. Simply allow the question to linger. How do we make peace with the echoes of our past, when the mind itself seems determined to keep them alive? Imagine standing in the heart of a bustling city square, surrounded by a sea of faces, each one flickering with life, laughter, and hurried purpose. The air hums with the chatter of countless voices, the clatter of footsteps, the distant wail of a siren weaving through the crowd. You are not alone, far from it. Humanity encircles you, a living tide of existence, and yet, as you stand there, rooted to the spot, a cold, unshakable truth begins to settle into your bones. You are utterly, profoundly alone. No one sees you. No one truly knows you. The faces blur into a faceless mass, and the noise becomes a hollow echo, as if you were a ghost adrift in a world that cannot touch you. This is not the solitude of an empty room or a silent forest. This is the piercing dread of isolation in the midst of connection, the horror of being unseen even when surrounded by others. Consider for a moment the strange paradox of a crowd. We are drawn to gatherings, to the warmth of shared spaces, seeking comfort in the presence of our kind. We are social creatures after all, wired to find meaning in the bonds we forge, in the glances and words that tether us to one another. But what happens when those tethers snap? Not through distance or absence, but through an invisible barrier within. What happens when you stand among hundreds, thousands, and yet feel as though you are the only soul in existence? It is a quiet terror, subtle at first, like a whisper in the back of your mind. You watch as people pass by, their eyes skimming over you, their conversations flowing around you like water around a stone. You reach out, perhaps with a smile or a word, but the response feels shallow, fleeting, as if you are speaking a language no one else can hear. Slowly, the realization dawns. You are an island, untouchable, unknowable, even here in this ocean of life. This is not merely loneliness, though it wears a similar mask. Loneliness aches for connection, for someone to fill the void. This is something deeper, more unsettling, a disconnection that feels almost metaphysical, as if you have slipped out of the fabric of reality itself. You begin to wonder if the fault lies within you. Are you the one who cannot reach out, cannot resonate with the rhythm of those around you? Or is it the crowd itself, so consumed by its own motion that it has forgotten how to truly see? Perhaps it is both, a tragic mismatch between a soul yearning to be known and a world too distracted to notice. And so, you stand there, a silent observer in a theatre of strangers, feeling the weight of your own invisibility grow heavier with each passing moment. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever felt this hollow ache, this strange alienation, in a place where you should belong? Perhaps at a gathering of friends, where laughter rings out but none of it feels meant for you, or in a crowded street, where the sheer volume of life only sharpens the sense of your own detachment. What is it about these moments that cuts so deeply? Is it the reminder of our own fragility, the fear that we might never truly be understood? Or is it something more primal, a vestige of a time when being unseen by the tribe meant danger, meant survival was at stake? Let us linger on this thought, turning it over like a smooth, cold stone in the hand. Imagine a woman, let's call her Clara, standing in the middle of a vibrant festival. Lanterns glow overhead, casting golden light on faces painted with joy. Music weaves through the air, pulling bodies into dance, and the scent of spiced food drifts on the breeze. Clara is dressed for the occasion, her smile practiced and bright, yet inside, a chasm yawns wide. She watches couples twirl, friends embrace, children dart through the crowd with shrieks of delight, and she feels none of it. It is as if a glass wall separates her from the celebration, allowing her to see but not to touch, to hear but not to feel. She wonders if anyone notices her stillness, if anyone senses the quiet storm beneath her composed exterior. But the festival moves on, indifferent, and Clara remains a shadow among the light, a stranger to the very joy she stands within. This is the horror of the hollow crowd, not the fear of being alone, but the fear of being alone while surrounded by everything you should desire. It raises questions that linger long after the crowd has dispersed. Are we truly connected to others, or are we all in some way performing for an audience that cannot see past the surface? Is the crowd a mirror, reflecting back our deepest fear, that we are at our core unknowable? Or is it a labyrinth, a maze of fleeting interactions that promise meaning, but deliver only echoes? Clara, standing there amidst the revelry, might never find the answer. And perhaps that is the true dread. Not the isolation itself, but the suspicion that it is an inescapable part of being human. Take a moment to reflect on this. Picture yourself in Clara's place, surrounded yet unseen. Feel the weight of that invisible barrier, the quiet ache of being a ghost in a living world. What does it stir within you? Is it sorrow, unease, or perhaps a strange kind of peace in acknowledging this shared, silent struggle? Let the thought settle, like dust after a storm, and simply be with it for a while. Imagine a moment where time itself seems to falter, where the steady tick of the clock ceases, and the world around you holds its breath. You're caught in a stillness so profound that it feels as though the universe has forgotten to move forward. The air grows heavy, laden with an unspoken question. Are you still part of the endless march of existence, or have you slipped through its cracks into something beyond comprehension? This is the terror of the timeless void. A fear that creeps in not with a scream, but with an eerie, unending silence. Picture yourself standing in a familiar place, perhaps a quiet room at dusk, the faint glow of twilight seeping through a window. You've been here 1,000 times before, yet something is wrong. The hands of the old clock on the wall are frozen, refusing to budge. The distant hum of life outside, the murmur of voices, the rustle of leaves has vanished, as if the world beyond these walls has been erased. You wait for a sound, a sign, anything to break this suffocating pause, but nothing comes. Minutes stretch into what feels like hours, yet nothing changes. The light doesn't fade, the shadows don't shift. It's as if you've been plucked from the river of time and left stranded on a shore that doesn't exist. This isn't merely the discomfort of waiting, it's something deeper, something that gnaws at the edges of your understanding. What if this moment is all there is? What if the past has dissolved into a dream you can no longer grasp, and the future is a promise that will never arrive? You begin to wonder if you've always been here, trapped in this frozen fragment, and the life you thought you lived was nothing more than a fleeting illusion. The mind recoils at such a thought, doesn't it? We are creatures bound to the rhythm of change, days turning to nights, seasons bleeding into one another, our very heartbeats marking the passage of seconds. To be severed from that flow is to lose the tether that anchors us to reality itself. Consider, for a moment, how much of who we are is woven into the fabric of time. Our memories are milestones along its path. Our hopes are bets placed on its continuation. But in this void, where time neither moves nor breathes, what are we? Are we still human? Or do we become something else? Ghosts haunting a moment that refuses to end. There's a quiet horror in this, a dread that seeps into the bones like a winter chill. It's not the fear of death, but of an existence so still that it mimics eternity, an endless now that strips away meaning. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever felt time slip away from you, even for a fleeting second? Perhaps in the depth of a sleepless night, when the world is hushed and the hours seem to blur into one another, or in a moment of profound loss, when the weight of a single instant feels heavier than a lifetime. In those cracks, do we glimpse the timeless void, a place where the mind cannot rest because there is no before or after to frame it? Let's wander further into this thought. Imagine that this frozen moment isn't just a quirk of perception, but a truth you've stumbled upon. What if time, as we know it, is merely a story we tell ourselves to make sense of chaos? Philosophers and scientists alike have grappled with this mystery for centuries. The ancient Greeks spoke of Kronos, the relentless god of linear time, and Kairos, the fleeting moment of opportunity, two faces of a concept we can never fully grasp. Modern physics tells us that time might not be the steady arrow we imagine, but a dimension that bends and warps, even folding in on itself. Could it be then that in this stillness, you've touched something real, a glimpse of existence outside the illusion of progression? Yet, there's no comfort in this revelation, only a creeping unease. To be caught in the timeless void is to be neither living nor gone, neither moving nor at rest. It's a liminal space, a threshold between worlds that offers no passage. You can't step forward, for there is no path ahead. You can't retreat, for there is no past to return to. All you have is this eternal pause, a canvas of nothingness where even thought begins to feel like an intrusion. The mind, desperate for a rhythm, starts to invent its own, counting heartbeats, tracing patterns in the silence. But these are fragile fictions, crumbling under the weight of an unyielding void. And so, you remain, suspended in a moment that refuses to release you. Perhaps this is the true terror, not the loss of time, but the realization that without it, we are untethered, undefined. We crave the forward march, even when it leads to decay, because it gives shape to our fleeting lives. Without it, we are adrift, lost in a sea of stillness that mirrors the infinite. What does it mean to exist in such a place? Are we still ourselves? Or do we dissolve into the silence, becoming one with the void we fear? Take a moment to reflect on this. Let the weight of that question settle over you like a quiet fog. In the deepest corners of your mind, do you sense the shadow of this timeless dread, the fear of being caught outside the flow of everything you know? As you sit with this thought, let the stillness linger, not as a threat, but as a mirror, reflecting the fragile beauty of each passing second we so often overlook. Imagine a thought, a tiny seed of an idea slipping into your mind unnoticed. At first, it seems harmless, a fleeting notion that brushes past your awareness like a whisper in a crowded room. But then, it lingers. It burrows deeper, its roots threading through the quiet corners of your consciousness, wrapping around every other thought until it becomes impossible to ignore. This is not just a passing fancy or a momentary worry. It is a parasite, an uninvited guest that feeds on your attention, draining the light from your reason and growing larger with every moment you give it space. What happens when a single idea takes hold of you so completely that it begins to feel like it owns you? Picture a man named Elias, a quiet soul living a life of routine, his days marked by the steady rhythm of work and rest. One evening, as he sits alone in his dimly lit apartment, a thought creeps in, an idea so simple yet so insidious that it catches him off guard. What if he's forgotten something vital, something irretrievable? The notion starts as a faint itch, a mild unease that he can almost dismiss. But as the hours pass, it festers. He begins to replay his day, then his week, then years of his life, searching for a gap, a missing piece he cannot name. The thought grows, branching into questions he cannot answer. What if it's not just a forgotten task, but a forgotten truth? What if he's been living a lie without even knowing it? Night after night, this idea consumes him, pulling him away from sleep, from peace, from the simplicity of his once untroubled mind. Consider for a moment how fragile our mental landscape truly is. We like to believe we are the architects of our thoughts, that we choose what to dwell on and what to let go. But what if some ideas are not ours to control? What if they arrive unbidden, like a weed sprouting in a carefully tended garden, and no amount of effort can uproot them? The horror lies not just in the thought itself, but in its persistence, in the way it clings to us, whispering endlessly until it drowns out all other voices. It becomes a lens through which we see the world, distorting everything into shadows of doubt or fear. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever felt the weight of a thought that refused to leave? One that seemed to grow heavier the more you tried to push it away? Elias begins to notice how this parasitic idea alters him. His hands tremble as he pours his morning coffee, his focus shattered by the constant murmur of that unanswerable question. Conversations with friends become hollow, as half of his mind is elsewhere, tangled in the web of his obsession. He wonders if this thought is a part of him now, an inseparable fragment of his being, or if it is something foreign, an invader that has claimed territory within his psyche. The ancient Greeks spoke of demons, unseen forces that could possess a person, guiding or tormenting them. Could it be that some thoughts are like these demons, entities of the mind that we cannot exorcise, no matter how we try? Let us wander deeper into this mystery. What is it about certain ideas that makes them so adhesive, so capable of consuming us? Is it their ambiguity, the way they evade resolution, leaving us in a state of perpetual unease? Or is it something within us, a hidden vulnerability that allows them to take root, a crack in the foundation of our certainty through which they seep? Perhaps the true terror is not the thought itself, but the realization that we may not be as sovereign over our minds as we believe. We are taught to trust our inner world as a sanctuary, a place of refuge. But when a single idea turns that sanctuary into a prison, where can we escape? As Elias wrestles with his relentless thought, He begins to question his own autonomy. Is he thinking this idea, or is it thinking through him? The line between self and other blurs, and he feels as though he is losing ground to something he cannot see or touch. The parasitic thought grows, not in complexity, but in intensity, suffocating his ability to reason, to rest, to simply be. It is as if his mind has become a battlefield, and he is no longer sure who or what is fighting for control. Ponder this quietly as the night deepens around you. What thoughts have taken root in your own mind, uninvited, and refuse to let go? Are they still there, nestled in the shadows, waiting for a moment of stillness to resurface? The horror of a parasitic idea is not in its content, but in its power to reshape us, to make us strangers to ourselves. And perhaps the most unsettling question of all is this: when such a thought takes hold, how much of us remains truly our own? Let that linger as you drift, as you wonder, as you surrender to the quiet mysteries of the mind. Imagine, for a moment, that you are not alone within yourself, that somewhere, in the quiet chambers of your mind, there lurks another version of you, a shadow, a mirror, but not quite the same. This other self wears your face, speaks with your voice, yet its eyes hold a darkness you dare not name. It is not a stranger, but something far more terrifying, a doppelganger within, a reflection of all you fear to acknowledge. What would you do if you came face to face with this hidden twin? Would you embrace it, or would you flee from the truth it embodies? This is not a tale of ghostly apparitions or folklore, though the idea of the doppelganger has haunted human stories for centuries. In ancient myths, to see one's double was an omen of death, a warning that the soul had split and doom was near. But what if this shadow is not a phantom of the external world, but a manifestation of the internal one? What if the true horror lies not in seeing a duplicate outside yourself, but in recognizing that it has always lived within, waiting for the moment to step forward and claim its place? Picture a man named Elias, ordinary in every way, living a life of quiet routine. Each morning, he rises, brews his coffee, and stares into the bathroom mirror as he prepares for the day. But one morning, something is different. The face looking back at him seems off. The lines are the same, the eyes familiar, yet there is a smirk where there should be none, a glint of something cruel in the gaze. He blinks, and it's gone. A trick of the light, he tells himself. But as the days pass, the feeling grows. In fleeting moments, he catches glimpses of this other self, not just in mirrors, but in the corners of his thoughts. A whisper of malice when he speaks kindly, a surge of anger when he means to stay calm. It's as if another Elias is stirring, one who knows every secret he's buried, every shame he's hidden, and is eager to let them spill into the light. What terrifies Elias is not the idea of being replaced, but the suspicion that this darker version might be the truer one. What if the self he presents to the world, the polite, measured man, is nothing but a mask, a fragile shell crafted to conceal the raw, untamed shadow beneath? Philosophers have long grappled with this duality, the notion that within each of us lies a hidden nature, a Jungian shadow composed of all we repress and deny. Carl Jung himself spoke of this shadow as an integral part of the psyche, a repository of instincts and desires too wild or shameful to face. To integrate it, he argued, is to become whole. But what if facing it feels less like healing and more like surrender? What if, in acknowledging this doppelganger within, Elias risks losing the self he's fought so hard to build? Consider your own mind for a moment. Are there thoughts, impulses, or memories you've locked away, hoping they'll never surface? Perhaps a fleeting moment of envy, a buried resentment, or a fear so deep you've never dared to voice it? What if those fragments of yourself aren't gone, but merely waiting, coalescing into a form that mirrors you, yet defies you? The horror of the doppelganger within is not just in its existence, but in its intimacy. It knows you better than anyone ever could. It has walked every step of your life, felt every pain, and harbored every unspoken thought. And now it wants to be seen. Take a moment to reflect on this. What would your shadow look like if it stepped into the light? Would it be a stranger? Or would it feel like coming home to a truth you've always known? Elias begins to dream of this other self. In his sleep, he stands in a dimly lit room, facing a figure who is both him and not him. The figure doesn't speak, but its presence is a weight, a silent accusation. When Elias wakes, his heart races, not from fear of attack, but from the creeping realization that he might be the intruder in his own life. Is it possible, he wonders, that the shadow is not a distortion, but the original? That the man he's become is merely a veneer, painted over a canvas of darker hues? The ancient Greeks believed in the concept of the daimon, a kind of inner spirit or guide, sometimes benevolent, sometimes malevolent. Could this shadow be his daemon, not a foe to be vanquished, but a part of him that demands to be heard? The horror deepens as Elias notices changes in himself. Small at first, a harsher tone in his voice, a coldness in his actions, but soon he catches himself thinking thoughts that don't feel like his own, desires that appall him yet draw him in. He begins to question where he ends and this other begins. Is there even a boundary? Or has there always been a silent partnership, a dance between light and dark that he's only now becoming aware of? The true dread is not in being overtaken, but in the possibility that there was never a separation to begin with, that the doppelganger within is not an invader, but the very foundation of who he is. Let this linger in your mind as you drift through your own thoughts. The shadow self, the doppelganger within, is not a monster to be slain, nor a ghost to be banished. It is a mirror, reflecting what we fear to see, yet cannot escape. And perhaps, in its quiet, unsettling presence, there lies a question worth pondering. If this darker twin is part of us, what does it mean to be whole? Does peace come from suppressing it, or from finally meeting its gaze and whispering, "I see you"? Take a moment to reflect on this. As the night deepens and the world grows still, what shadows wait within your own mind, patiently asking to be known? Imagine for a moment a delicate thread that holds together the very fabric of who you are. This thread, invisible yet vital, weaves through every thought, every memory, every fleeting sense of self. Now picture that thread beginning to fray, slowly at first, almost imperceptibly, until the unraveling quickens, and the tapestry of your mind starts to come apart at the seams. What happens when the structure of your consciousness, the quiet certainty of your own coherence, begins to dissolve? This is not a sudden collapse, but a gradual creeping descent, a silent tragedy where the mind itself becomes a stranger, a puzzle with pieces that no longer fit. Consider the life of a man named Elias, whose days once flowed with the steady rhythm of routine. He was a teacher, a man of words and ideas, whose mind was his sanctuary, a place of order and clarity. But over time, something shifted. It began with small lapses, forgetting a student's name mid-sentence or struggling to recall the point he was making as chalk hovered over the blackboard. These were trifles, easily dismissed as fatigue or distraction. Yet, as weeks turned to months, the lapses grew into chasms. He would find himself standing in his classroom, surrounded by expectant faces, unable to string together a single coherent thought. Words slipped away like water through cupped hands, leaving behind only a hollow silence. At home, alone in the dim light of evening, he began to notice how his own voice sounded foreign, as if someone else were speaking through him. His reflection in the mirror seemed to waver, not in form, but in essence, as though the man staring back was piecing himself together from fragments of someone else's life. What is it that we fear most when the mind begins to unravel? Is it the loss of memory, the fading of faces and places that once anchored us to the world? Or is it something deeper, something more primal, the terror of losing the very ability to make sense of anything at all? Elias felt this dread like a weight in his chest, a quiet panic that grew each time he reached for a thought and found nothing but fog. He began to write notes to himself, desperate scribbles on scraps of paper, as if by pinning down his thoughts, he could hold onto the slipping edges of his sanity. But even the notes betrayed him. Words he swore he had written appeared as gibberish, or worse, as sentences that carried no meaning, no trace of the man who had penned them. Was this still his mind at work? Or had something else taken its place, a shadow self that mimicked thought but lacked soul? Let us pause here in the stillness of this unraveling. Take a moment to reflect on this. What would it mean to lose the thread of your own story, to wake each day with less of yourself, to feel the boundaries of your consciousness erode like a shoreline under relentless waves? Imagine reaching for a memory, a simple one, the sound of a loved one's laughter, and finding only a void where it should be. How long could you endure before the fear of losing more became a terror too heavy to bear? Elias's descent was not marked by dramatic breakdowns or violent outbursts, but by a quiet erosion, a slow vanishing of the man he once knew himself to be. He began to avoid mirrors, not out of vanity, but because he could no longer trust what he saw. Conversations became labyrinths, each sentence a turn that might lead to a dead end of confusion. He wondered, in those fleeting moments of clarity, if sanity was ever truly a given, a bedrock beneath our feet, or if it was merely a fragile illusion, a glass pane that could shatter without warning under the weight of time or circumstance. Was the mind a fortress, or was it a house of cards trembling in the slightest breeze? And so we must ask ourselves, as we linger in the shadow of Elias's story, what is sanity, if not a temporary harmony? A delicate balance that can tilt without notice? Is it a gift we possess, or a loan we must one day repay? The horror of an unraveling mind lies not just in the loss of what was, but in the uncertainty of what remains. For when the pieces of thought no longer align, when the self becomes a mosaic of broken edges, what are we left with? Are we still ourselves, or do we become something else entirely? Ghosts haunting the ruins of a once familiar mind. This fear, this quiet dread of disintegration, creeps into the corners of our awareness, whispering questions we dare not answer. It reminds us that the mind, for all its wonders, is not an unshakable foundation. It is a garden that can wither, a flame that can flicker, a thread that can snap. And in that fragility lies a terror more profound than any external threat. A terror that asks us to confront the possibility that we, too, might one day look within and find only fragments, scattered and irretrievable, in the vast, silent expanse of what we once called ourselves. Take a moment to reflect on this, to sit with the weight of such a thought, and to wonder how closely we all walk to the edge of that unraveling, without ever knowing just how near it truly is. Imagine for a moment that you are standing at the edge of a vast, uncharted ocean. The water is black as ink, stretching endlessly into a horizon you cannot see. There is no sound, no wind, only the oppressive weight of silence pressing against you. You peer into the depths, searching for something, anything to anchor your understanding, but the surface reflects nothing back, not even your own face. This is not a place of physical danger, but of something far more unsettling. The fear of what cannot be known, the dread of questions that have no answers, the abyssal unknown that lurks within the mind. This is where we find ourselves now, at a precipice of thought so deep it seems to swallow light itself. The unknown is not merely a void outside us, it is a chasm within, a place where the most profound fears are born. What is it about the mysteries we cannot grasp that chills us so deeply? Is it the absence of answers, or the suspicion that some truths are too vast, too alien, to ever be held by a human mind? Consider the ancient philosophers who gazed at the stars, trembling not at their beauty, but at the infinite questions they posed. What lies beyond? What are we in the face of such immensity? Even now, in an age of science and reason, we stand no closer to unraveling the core of existence. The more we learn, the wider the abyss seems to grow, as if knowledge itself is but a flickering candle in a cavern of endless dark. Picture a solitary figure, a scholar perhaps, bent over ancient texts late into the night. Their room is small, lit only by the dim glow of a single lamp, but their mind wanders far beyond the walls. They seek to understand the nature of time, the origin of consciousness, the meaning of it all. Yet with every page they turn, a shadow grows heavier in their chest. Each answer they uncover births 10 new questions, each more unanswerable than the last. What if the truth is not a destination, but a labyrinth with no exit? What if the act of seeking itself is what fuels this dread, as though the mind, in its hunger for meaning, conjures its own torment? The scholar closes their book, but the silence of the room feels louder now, thick with the weight of all they will never know. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever felt that shiver of unease when faced with a question too big to hold? Perhaps it was a fleeting thought about the end of life, or the vastness of the universe, or the hidden corners of your own psyche. Did you push it away, or did you linger at the edge of that abyss, peering into its depths until the unknown seemed to stare back? This fear of the unknowable is not a modern affliction. It is woven into the very fabric of our being. Long before, we had words for it. Our ancestors felt it too, huddled around fires in the wilderness, gazing into the night sky with a mix of awe and terror. They crafted myths to tame the mystery, stories of gods and spirits to fill the void of understanding. Yet even those tales carried an undercurrent of dread, a whispered acknowledgement that some forces, some truths, lie forever beyond our reach. The ancient Greeks spoke of chaos, the primordial void from which all things emerged, a concept so incomprehensible it could only be named, never truly known. Even today, we grapple with the same unease when we confront the limits of our perception, when we realize that our minds, for all their brilliance, are but tiny vessels adrift on an ocean of the unfathomable, and so we return to that black, endless sea within. What is it that haunts us most in this inner abyss? Is it the fear that we will never find the answers we seek, or the deeper, more insidious suspicion that there are no answers at all? Perhaps the true horror of the unknown is not in its vastness, but in its indifference. It does not beckon or threaten, it simply exists, a silent mirror to our own fragility. We project our fears into it, our longing for meaning, our desperate need to understand, and yet it offers nothing in return. It is a void that does not care if we tremble at its edge or turn away in despair. It simply is. Let this thought linger as you drift through the quiet of your own mind. Consider the mysteries that have haunted you, the questions you've buried beneath the noise of daily life. What lies at the bottom of your own abyss? Is it something you dare to seek, or something you fear to name? The unknown waits patiently, always there, just beyond the reach of thought. A shadow that grows larger the closer we come to its edge. And perhaps, in that shadow, there is not just fear, but a strange, melancholic beauty. A reminder that to be human is to wonder, to reach, even when the answers slip through our fingers like water into the dark. Imagine, for a moment, standing at the edge of an endless void, not a physical chasm, but something far more intimate, a hollow expanse within your own soul. There is no sound here, no light, no tether to the world you once knew. It is just you and an overwhelming, suffocating emptiness that seems to swallow every thought, every memory, every trace of who you thought you were. This is not merely the absence of something. It is the presence of nothingness itself, a consuming void that strips away meaning and leaves only a quiet, unshakable dread in its wake. What happens when you confront this inner abyss? When you peer into a space where purpose and connection dissolve like mist in the morning sun? Let us step gently into this shadowed realm, where the horror lies not in what exists, but in what does not. Picture a person, let's call them Eli, sitting alone in a dimly lit room as the world outside hums with distant life. Eli has always, carried a certain weight within, a quiet unease that they could never quite name. But tonight, something shifts. It begins as a fleeting thought, a whisper of doubt about the life they've built, the relationships they've nurtured, the dreams they've chased. That whisper grows, not into a storm of noise, but into a silence so profound that it drowns out everything else. Eli feels as though they are falling inward, spiraling into a place where nothing holds weight, not love, not ambition, not even the comforting rhythm of their own breath. It is as if the very fabric of their being is unraveling, thread by thread, leaving behind only a vast, empty space where meaning once lived. Have you ever felt this, even for a fleeting second? That moment when the structures of your life, the stories you tell yourself to keep going, suddenly seem hollow, as if they could crumble at the slightest touch. This emptiness is not a mere absence, it is a force, a consuming nothingness that creeps into every corner of thought. For Eli, it manifests as a series of quiet, devastating realizations. The laughter of friends feels like an echo from a past that no longer belongs to them. The goals they once held dear appear as mirages, shimmering illusions that vanish upon closer inspection. Even the mirror offers no solace. Eli looks into their own eyes and sees not a person, but a void staring back, a shell where a soul once resided. This is the horror of level 90, a terror so subtle yet so profound that it reshapes the very way one exists in the world. It is not the fear of death or pain, but the fear of meaninglessness, the dread of a life stripped bare until nothing remains to anchor the self. Take a moment to reflect on this. When was the last time you questioned the weight of your own existence, the purpose that holds you steady against the tide of oblivion? Philosophers have long grappled with this abyss, this confrontation with nothingness. Jean-Paul Sartre, in his musings on existentialism, spoke of the nausea that arises when we realize there is no inherent meaning to life, no cosmic script to guide us. We are free, yes, but that freedom comes with a price, a vertigo of the soul, a dizziness born from the endless possibilities of nothingness. For Eli, this is no abstract theory, it is a lived reality, a suffocating weight that presses down with every breath. What does one do when the foundations of life crumble, when the stories we tell ourselves no longer hold? Do we rebuild, crafting new illusions to shield us from the void? Or do we dare to sit with the emptiness, to let it teach us something about the fragility of all we hold dear? Consider the universe itself, vast and indifferent, stretching out into infinities we cannot grasp. Scientists tell us that much of space is empty, a sprawling nothingness punctuated by fleeting bursts of matter and light. Is this not a mirror to our own inner landscapes? Are we not, in some way, made of the same emptiness, a collection of fleeting thoughts and feelings, surrounded by vast stretches of uncharted silence within? For Eli, this parallel offers no comfort, only a deeper sense of isolation. If the universe is empty, and if we are empty too, then what is the point of reaching out, of seeking connection, of striving for anything at all? The consuming nothingness whispers that perhaps there is no point, that perhaps the horror lies in realizing we are but echoes in a void, destined to fade without leaving a trace. Yet, there is something strangely poetic in this terror, a quiet beauty in the stillness of the abyss. To confront nothingness is to confront the raw essence of existence itself, stripped of pretense and illusion. Eli sits with this emptiness, not fighting it, not fleeing from it, but simply being with it. And in that silence, there is a kind of truth, a recognition that meaning is not given, but made. If the void consumes all, then perhaps it also offers a blank canvas, a space where new purpose can be painted, however fragile, however fleeting. But this is no easy solace. It is a bitter, hard-won insight, born from the depths of dread. Take a moment to reflect on this. What would you create if you stood at the edge of your own inner void? What meaning would you forge from the silence? As we linger here, In the shadow of this consuming nothingness, let us not rush to escape it. Let us sit with Eli in that dimly lit room, feeling the weight of a life stripped bare, and ponder the quiet terror of a world without anchor. It is a horror that does not scream or startle, but seeps into the bones like a winter chill, reminding us of how easily the light of purpose can flicker and fade. Yet, in this very emptiness, there lies a question, a whisper of possibility. If all can be consumed by nothingness, then what remains truly ours to hold? Let this thought linger as a quiet companion, a gentle unease that invites us to look deeper, to feel more fully, even as the void stretches endlessly before us. Imagine for a moment that you stand at the edge of a vast, uncharted abyss, not one carved into the earth, but one that resides within you. It is a place where every whisper of fear, every shadow of doubt, and every buried secret converges into a single inescapable truth. This is not a physical descent, but a journey to the deepest core of your own consciousness, where the mind turns inward and confronts its ultimate terror, itself. What if the greatest horror is not in the monsters we imagine, or the darkness we flee, but in the infinite mirror of self-awareness, reflecting every flaw, every fear, every hidden fracture we've ever tried to ignore? Picture a quiet room at the edge of midnight, the world outside hushed as if holding its breath. In this stillness, a solitary figure sits, eyes closed, as if meditating, or perhaps dreading. Their mind, once a sanctuary, has become a labyrinth with no exit. Every thought they've ever suppressed, every memory they've locked away, begins to rise like mist from a forgotten lake. There is no running from this. There is no distraction, no noise loud enough to drown out the chorus of their own inner voices. They are face to face with the raw, unfiltered essence of who they are. A reckoning that strips away every mask, every pretense, until only the unvarnished self remains. Can you fathom the weight of such a moment? The terror of seeing yourself not as you wish to be, but as you truly are, with every scar and shadow laid bare. This is the ultimate dread, the pinnacle of psychological horror, not the fear of external threats, but the confrontation with the infinite depths within. It is as if the mind has turned itself inside out, revealing a landscape more vast and unknowable than any wilderness. Every doubt you've ever felt, every guilt you've carried, every fleeting thought of despair you've pushed aside, they are all here, waiting. They do not judge. They simply exist, as undeniable as your own heartbeat. And in this eternal reckoning, there is a strange, haunting clarity. What if the horror is not in the confrontation itself, but in the realization that you cannot escape it? That to be human is to carry this abyss within you always, a silent companion that knows you better than you know yourself. Take a moment to reflect on this. Imagine peering into that inner mirror, seeing not just the face you show the world, but the one you hide even from yourself. What would you find there, in the quietest, darkest corner of your being? Is it anger, regret, or perhaps a longing so deep it hurts to name? Or is it simply the fear of finding nothing at all, a void where meaning should be? This reckoning is not a moment of destruction, but of revelation. It is the mind's final frontier, where every illusion shatters, and you are left with the raw, unshielded truth. The ancient Greeks spoke of the Delphic maxim, "Know thyself," as the highest pursuit of wisdom. But what if knowing thyself is also the highest form of terror? What if to truly see yourself is to stand at the edge of an abyss that gazes back, not with malice, but with an unflinching, eternal stare? The horror lies not in being seen, but in realizing that you have always been seen by yourself. Every thought, every fleeting impulse, every buried shame has been witnessed by the silent observer within. And yet, there is a strange peace in this terror, a quiet acceptance that comes from facing the inevitable. For in this ultimate confrontation, there is nowhere left to hide. The mind, in all its complexity and contradiction, is both the prison and the liberator. It is the source of every fear, yet also the only force capable of transcending it. What if true courage is not in fleeing from this inner abyss, but in standing at its edge, unafraid to look down? What if the greatest act of defiance against horror is to embrace it, not as an enemy, but as a part of who you are? Take a moment to breathe. Let this thought linger, like a whisper in the stillness. Consider the vastness of your own inner world, the uncharted territories of thought and emotion that you carry with you every day. Are you afraid to look too closely, to dive too deep? Or is there a quiet strength in knowing that even in the face of such infinite dread, you endure? As the midnight room fades into shadow and the solitary figure opens their eyes, there is no resolution, no neat ending to this journey. The reckoning is eternal, a cycle that repeats with every moment of introspection, every quiet hour of solitude. The mind remains a mystery, a landscape of endless depth, where fear and wonder intertwine like threads in an ancient tapestry. And perhaps that is the truest horror of all, not that we are haunted by our inner selves, but that we are bound to them, forever searching, forever questioning, forever gazing into the mirror of our own existence, uncertain of what we might find.